It is Orange and Blue today, here to talk about a strength that could only be getting stronger for the Denver Broncos, Mace, and that's the cornerback position.
A strength that, as we saw late last year, did have a point where the depth got compromised. Now, they did turn in another direction depth-wise and got a bit better performance, but the old cliche of next man up reaches a point where you do run out of next men. So now, as we talk about the cornerback position, it's fortified, and maybe a year from now, we're talking about it really looking good at the top line after the big investment the Broncos made at the top of the draft in Jahdae Barron there, that guy that you see on the right working at rookie minicamp back in May. But it's a position that where you feel great about it. You have the reigning defensive player of the year in Pat Surtain, a pretty good third-year corner in Riley Moss, a solid nickel slot corner in Jaquan McMillan, and now a very intriguing young rookie first-round pick in Jahdae Barron, a guy that the Broncos did not expect to be their season, somebody who really changed the outlook and shuffled the deck there for what the Broncos think they can get out of this position.
Right. It changes things when Barron is there in the draft and the Broncos pick him up. And starting with Surtain, we've asked the question, and it was mainly you on one of our shows earlier this offseason of like, how does Pat Surtain get better from the top of the top? And how does Jahdae Barron play into that, Mace? Because there really aren't any weaknesses if everybody's healthy. And Barron, a rookie, you'd think, oh, he's going to get picked on. Not so fast, my friend.
Long term, you look at it with Barron and say, if he can reach his ceiling, then is he somebody who becomes so proficient that teams really are forced into pick your poison mode when they attack the Broncos secondary? And does that force more balls into Pat Surtain's direction and give him more chances to make plays? Because really the only thing that prevents Surtain from having more explosive moments, the type of which he had against the Las Vegas Raiders last October, is simply opportunities. And a great many quarterbacks don't give him those opportunities. There are not many of those there, because sometimes teams simply say, we're just not going to throw in his direction. There aren't many games like the ones the Broncos had against the Cincinnati Bengals, where you have a matchup where he's facing, for example, Jamar Chase, and you're facing a receiver who is the offensive equal of Surtain, to where, okay, there are going to be plays in his direction, but Chase is such to the point, and Joe Burrow is such a great quarterback, to where even in that matchup, there's not going to be a huge amount of opportunities for Surtain to make the kind of play that, for example, he made against Gardner Minshew and the Raiders back there in October. Now, that being said, there are some games on the schedule where the Broncos schematically can maybe force a young quarterback into a mistake in Surtain's direction that he can capitalize on for those kind of signature moments that maybe put him back in the DPOY conversation again. Maybe week one against a rookie quarterback, potentially, if he starts that game. Talking about Tennessee, Cam Ward, number 1 overall pick, coming into Mile High. Maybe that's the kind of moment where you can get the season off to a signature start type of moment for Pat Surtain.
Yep. And I think of the receivers that he's going to take on, including a CD Lamb and AJ Brown, Malik Neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Russell Wilson.
You gonna if he's still the starter, you're the one who's put the bug in my ear. If Russ is still the starter by that point in the season, what if it's somebody else?
It might be Jackson Dart by that time. But either way, you're going to have top tier talent. Jamar Chase, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, would see if he'd be on Ladd McConkey, right, against the Chargers. You know, Surtain stays on his side. He shuts down his side. Mm-hmm. But he will be challenged. There will be some very tough competition at points this season.
There will, and some very tough quarterbacks as well. A lot of quarterbacks that you mentioned there with those receivers, quarterbacks who do know better. That's the thing. I mentioned Cam Ward as a quarterback who may in that moment be forced into a play that guides him into that direction. But you have a lot of quarterbacks who, generally speaking, unless they've got that alpha there, like Jamar Chase, who I think is receivers, probably headed the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You have a lot of quarterbacks who, even if they have terrific receivers, probably know better than to throw in Surtain's direction.
Yes.
So that's where, maybe the challenges won't be as frequent as you'd like. I mean, that's the gift of Surtain, but that's where Barron's growth comes into play. How quickly does he rise? Because, hey, back in 2021, even though Surtain didn't have the recognition just yet, by the end of that season, he was playing at an all-pro type level. We all recall that game against Cincinnati when he was going up against Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and he locked down Jamar Chase when the Bengals were on their way to the Super Bowl. So even then, even as a rookie, Pat Surtain, by the back half of that season, was playing at an all-pro level. So that's my way of saying that if Barron flourishes, can he reach an exceptionally high level by the end of his rookie season? Sure. Now, certainly he's got to play enough to get there. But based on what we're seeing right now, those opportunities could be there. Just listen to Sean Payton talk about how already Jahdae Barron there in OTAs working inside and outside, learning multiple positions. They're not just saying, okay, get one right. He is showing the intelligence and acumen to learn two positions and show off that kind of versatility that he had at the University of Texas.
He's extremely smart, and he played both at Texas. His instincts are real high. And so you can give him more than maybe some other younger player at the same position. Some guys you might say, hey, let's just leave him at left corner or right corner before we do it. I think he's one of those players that can handle volume. The vision for him is corner, inside and outside.
Seemed like a proud papa there.
Oh, yeah. Like, oh, boy, I got this guy. I nailed this one.
Yeah. And another one. Another hit for Sean Payton, everybody.
Yeah. May not have been the number one need because you do have Riley Moss coming back and Jaquan McMillan a solid slot corner. But as we saw last year, when they lost Riley Moss, they put Levi Wallace in. He struggled. Now, Chris Abrams-Draine, when they put him in, it looked a little bit better when he was out there. And Abrams-Draine, one of the guys who in that first week of OTAs when we watched, he was out there making plays. So certainly he stepped his game up. But at corner, you have to assume there's going to be an injury at some point. That's just something that you accept. So however many corners you have, you always need at least one or two more than that. So you've got three guys you feel good about. That's great. You probably need CB4, CB5 at some point. So let's say Barron works his way into that top three. And let's say he's handling inside outside role. I mean, this could end up being a situation. If he's playing inside and outside, it could look perhaps like Chris Harris Jr. when Chris would play outside in base package and they'd slip inside in sub package. So maybe it ends up looking like that if Barron is that good right away, and then Riley Moss goes outside in sub package, and that would if it works out that way, Riley Moss still ends up playing a ton because effectively, if you're in that nickel package, you're a starter. Like we saw that with Bradley Roby back in the no-fly zone days. So that in that instance, that would push Jaquan McMillan down. Or if it ends up being Jahdae Barron on the outside, and then Jaquan McMillan comes in the nickel that pushed Riley Moss down. Either way, somebody who's in the mix last year as effectively a starter gets knocked down to the number 4. It's sort of like we've been talking about throughout the offseason at safety, where someone who started becomes a high quality backup. So all of a sudden you've elevated the entire operation there, and it's something you feel good about, because when there's an inevitable injury, you are covered. You are going to have somebody who's experienced and quality who can step in, and odds are you're going to need that at some point, because almost every year you are talking about a cornerback injury at some point. Now you're going to have somebody who's trustworthy stepping up, assuming Barron is one of those top 3 guys. And if he's not quite ready for that, no problem. He's a quality 4th cornerback who almost certainly ends up stepping into a bigger role at some point.
Yeah, I mean, he's a future starter.
Yeah.
If he's number 3 this year, that would make a lot of sense. If he's number 3 week 1, that would make a lot of sense. But Mace, if he needs time to develop, they've got the gift of Jaquan McMillan and Chris Abrams-Drain.
Yes.
You know, so he can take the time to develop. Don't think it'll take that long for this man, though, because didn't Sean Payton say earlier that he's got the veteran presence?
Let's play that soundbite.
I would say exactly what we saw on tape. Smart, savvy. If you're watching closely, some people transition and stop very quickly. He's got really quick twitch. I'd say he's sticky in coverage. But I think, you know, he's one of those players that already at a young age understands splits. You know, I worry sometimes with the corners that defend. If you're defending every route, you're defending no route. And he's real savvy as to a tight split. He eliminates 80% of what could be run. You know, and so, man, you feel a veteran player.
I love that. Understanding splits. It's almost the opposite of route running for young receivers, because usually we say a lot of young receivers don't know how to run routes. A lot of young corners, as Coach Payton alludes to, like, they don't know the splits. They're, again, covering everything when you don't need to based on the formation.
Right. You can read a lot from what you observe pre-snap, and you can distill what you have to do down based on what you see, what you can study during the week, and then what you see out there. It ends up becoming simpler than it seems if you've got that understanding, and he has that understanding. That's something a lot of players don't have when they come in. Certainly, it's a testament to him. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that he played so many positions at Texas. So he had to learn so much as far as what every position in the secondary does and how they all work together. So he has an advanced understanding of how the secondary operates, how and why everything works as it does, how and why schemes work. I mean, he's almost another coach on the field. This is a guy who comes in as a rookie, but he's got the savvy of a 6 to 8 year veteran. You rarely see that. And very much, this is somebody who's going to fit the role of a defensive quarterback effectively. Impressive in so many ways. Plays a premium position. You and I talked about this at the draft. If you have premium talent at a premium position, even if it's one where you don't have a quote unquote need, you make that pick 10 times out of 10, and then you figure things out later. Sure, you know, there were other positions you could have gotten there, but it's a premium talent at a premium spot, happened to be sitting there, fell to you unexpectedly. You just make that pick and you move on.
Yeah.
The Broncos became a better team because they got Jahdae Barron.
Best player available, because you draft the better players and just go beat other teams with your better players.
And this is the luxury the Broncos now have because of all the work they've done on the roster. It's, you know, why do the Ravens keep winning games year after year?
They just keep reloading.
Yeah, they keep reloading. It's because the work they've done on the roster over the years has given them the luxury, you know, going all the way back, starting to when Ozzie Newsome became the GM in 1996, but even before, starting when Ozzie was working under Bill Belichick, that when they were still the Cleveland Browns before they moved to Baltimore, they did so much work on the roster. They put themselves in the position of saying, we don't have to pick for need. We can just pick the best guys.
Yep.
And
Led
because
to a
of
lot of Hall of Famers.
yes, yeah, just they can sit back and let the board come to them. And the Broncos are now in that very enviable position, I should say. So it allows them to, pick the best guy there in the first round, and somebody who's going to make other players better. We already saw a glimpse of that there in rookie minicamp. We got to watch Jahdae Barron go against Pat Bryant, third round.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Great guy. If you watch him, moves very smooth, great feet, and I can honestly see him like playing any position on the field. So, you know what I'm saying? A guy like that, with those aspects, with that speed, I can see him thriving very well in the league.
Yeah, he's going to make Pat Bryant better long-term as well. Look forward to watching that matchup, hopefully, throughout training camp, just like we saw there at rookie minicamp.
Think of all these young receivers that get tested against these corners. Think of the benefit that this team has with Bo Lowry. Yeah. And then think of Riley Moss.
Mm-hmm.
Riley's got to stay healthy. We already know he's talented. There's zero question. He's a great starter. There's zero question. He's just got to stay healthy. Barron's the type of guy that'll take your job and you won't get it back.
Yeah, because Riley's got some special talent as well. And my goodness, you can't coach that speed and you can't coach that length. And we saw last year that he also has the intangible of the short memory that gives you the resilience to come back when you're beaten. We saw that right there from the jump against Seattle in week 1, to not have a bad play, a bad moment affect his confidence. And he became a plus player as the season went on. And as we saw, when he got hurt against the Raiders, he was missed badly. I mean, you look at the defense with Riley Moss and without Riley Moss, and it was profoundly affected. That's credit to Riley Moss.
Yes.
How good he was, that he made himself indispensable. So now that being said, he hopefully will avoid injuries this year, but unfortunately, it's something the Broncos had to consider in their calculus. We knew going into the draft that it may not have been a first-round target they were expecting to get, but we knew they were going to likely come out of the draft with a corner at some point, and some of that had to do with Riley Moss having a significant injury in both of his first 2 seasons. That's just the unfortunate reality of what Riley Moss's career has been so far. So knock on whatever surface you can find. Hopefully it's better for Riley Moss this year, but until that pattern breaks, you have to assume there's a greater risk of injury for him going forward and be prepared. But now the Broncos are prepared because they are one layer deeper at corner, because they have Barron in their midst right now. You feel good about the top 5. And then right now, cornerback 6, as you constructed today, squarely on the bubble, is someone who has started for this team in the past, and that's Damari Mathis. He's in his 4th year. I mean, I feel like we were just talking about Damari Mathis as a rookie stepping into the starting lineup there on Monday Night Football against the Chargers back there in 2022. It gets late quickly, though. We're talking about him being in the final year of his rookie contract and being somebody who's very much on the bubble, as we have, we have younger guys that we're talking about in the mix there. Guys like Quentin Newsom, guys like Tanner McAllister. They bring in Jaden Robinson as an undrafted rookie as well. There's Reese Taylor in the mix, and all of those guys could be players who end up kind of pushing Mathis potentially out of the picture, maybe even if we're talking about practice squad spot as well.
Yeah, and a collection of young talent, practice squad spot, end of the bench. I like a lot of those guys that you mentioned. Reese Taylor specifically.
Yeah.
Newsom's got some size to him, but Taylor has that dog in him. From the limited time I've seen him, it's someone who doesn't back down from a challenge, even though his challenge is great. to make this team
Yeah.
or practice squad.
And as is the case with safety, special teams is probably going to help determine who ends up hanging on to one of those last spots as well.
How
So
many corners actively do they keep?
I think you'll see. I expect you'll see 5. The question is there a 6th corner who ends up being inactive? Like Chris Abrams-Drain right now, I think, is definitely the 5th corner, and he's active. I expect he's going to have a huge role on special teams. It wouldn't surprise me if he's one of the primary gunners. And in OTAs, watching him run down the field on punts, I mean, there was one play he shot down the field and forced a muff by getting down so fast. So he's looking to have a big role on teams. So I definitely see 5. The question is there a 6th corner who maybe is active some weeks, inactive others, or is that 6th corner somebody who ends up on the practice squad? And maybe you're talking about an elevation sometimes, or just being on the practice squad. Where is that depth comes from? And that may depend on whether it's Damari Mathis or somebody else. Damari Mathis squarely on the roster bubble right now.
Yeah, but the talent is there. I mean, we're talking about Chris Abrams-Drain as a 5th.
Yeah.
He could easily be the 3rd. If KAD was their 3rd, while he's somewhat inexperienced, Mace, I wouldn't mind it. I'd be like, okay, he's a 3rd with some upside. Let's see him. He's their 5th.
There are probably a handful of teams in the league right now for whom Chris Abrams-Drain would be a pretty solid number 3.
Oh, yeah.
But this team, tip of the cap to George Payton for the work he's done over the years. This team is deeper than most. And yeah, it took a minute for Abrams-Drain to get going last year. He was a little bit slow starting through offseason work and training camp. But then we saw by the time the Broncos had to put him out there in December, it wasn't too big for him. I mean, that Monday night game against Cleveland might not have been so much of a white knuckle ride if he'd been out there from the beginning. He showed when he got thrown into the fire late in that game, a tight game, that it wasn't too big for him.
Right. Mace, position previews are fun. And
They are.
They're fun because we get help from our audience on YouTube. How can folks help us out?
Like,
Comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell.
so that you never miss a vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's a BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty?